I never thought the happiest news of my life would mark the beginning of the hardest year I've ever known. Some stories begin with fireworks or at least a rush of laughter, but mine started on an ordinary Thursday morning, when the sunlight seemed to linger on everything just a little longer. I stood at the kitchen counter, fingers tapping the edge of the countertop as I waited for the toast to pop, listening to the soft hum of Charlotte's early spring outside the window. The whole neighborhood seemed to breathe and sync, birds in the maple trees, sprinklers hissing over neat lawns, a distant bark from the miller's retriever across the street. I held the test in my hand longer than I needed to, watching those pink lines settle into certainty. I thought about telling Ethan the news the night before, but something told me to wait until the morning, to catch him before work, when his guard might be down. I wanted to see his face when I told him he was going to be a father, to memorize his reaction the way you do when you think life is about to change for the better. He came down the stairs, phone already in hand, suit jacket thrown over one arm. I tried to read his mood, searching for some flicker of the man I married 3 years ago, gentle, clever, always quick to smile at my little jokes. But he seemed already elsewhere, mind ticking through the day ahead. Coffee? I offered, trying to keep my voice light, and he nodded, scrolling through emails. I blurted it out, unable to hold back. Ethan, I'm pregnant. The words felt too big for the room, but I smiled anyway, hoping he'd meet me halfway. He paused, just a second too long, and managed, "Are you sure you're ready for this?" No embrace, no laughter, just a practical frown as he set his mug down. For a second, I wondered if I'd misread the test, or the moment, or maybe even the man himself. I covered the tremor in my voice with a laugh. I think so. I hope so. I reached for his hand, but he was already picking up his keys, nodding absently. Congrats, Ash, he said, pecking my cheek, I'll call my folks later. Then he slipped out the door, leaving behind the scent of aftershave and a room that suddenly felt too quiet. I sat at the table, staring at the toast going cold. I knew he wasn't unkind, not in any obvious way, but a gentle distance had crept in since last winter, a slow cooling that I'd tried to ignore. If I had known how lonely a marriage could feel, maybe I would have listened to those early warning signs, the ones that whisper more than they shout. Later that day, Ethan's mom, Linda, called before I could even process what had happened. She congratulated us, already making plans, rattling off ideas for nursery themes and baby names, hardly pausing to let me speak. I knew you two would make us grandparents sooner or later, she said, her laughter filling the line. Richard chimed in from the background, joking about teaching the baby to fish up at their lake house. I laughed along, careful not to betray the unease that curled in my stomach. By the weekend, Ethan's new routine began. Instead of joining me for Saturday breakfast or lingering over coffee on the porch, he started heading over to his parents' house. Dad needs help with the gutters, he'd say. Mom wants me to set up her new TV. At first, I didn't complain. I knew families here were tight-knit. My own childhood was scattered between my mom's old apartment and wherever work took her. But as spring warmed into early summer, the empty spaces grew, Ethan gone most weekends, his laughter reserved for stories I didn't share. When my mother called, I did my best to sound cheerful. Maria was practical, caring in a hands-off way, checking in on my health and asking about my appointments. Our conversations were brief, always squeezed in between her work shifts, or while she was waiting for a bus. I assured her everything was fine, and she believed me, or at least let me keep my secrets. Take care of yourself, Ash. It's important to rest, you hear, she'd say. I'd promise, and hang up, feeling the gulf widen just a little more. On the loneliest afternoons, I wandered through the neighborhood, phone in hand, pretending I had errands to run. I'd see Sandra Lee watering her rosebushes across the street, always with a quick wave and a smile. Sometimes, Tiffany from yoga class would pass by, balancing her toddler on her hip and waving as she hurried home. I started to wonder if I could ever fit into the easy rhythms of this place, or if I was just drifting at the edges. Desperate for something to fill the silence, I started a pregnancy blog. At first, it was just for me, a digital diary full of half-formed thoughts, blurry photos of my morning walks, recipes that only half worked out. But soon, friends and even a few strangers began to comment. "Hang in there, Mama. You're going to do great." Their kindness was a balm, even if it came from people I'd never met. One evening, as I set the table for dinner, I overheard Ethan in the hallway, talking to his mother. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but his voice carried through the half-open door. "Don't worry, Mom. Nothing will change around here," he said, his tone firm, almost defensive. I couldn't tell if he was reassuring her or himself, but either way, I felt a chill settle in the pit of my stomach. That night, I lay awake, listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the distant laughter of neighbors on their porches. I glanced at Ethan, already asleep, his back to me. There was a cold distance between us, one I couldn't name, but couldn't ignore. I wrapped my arms around myself, promising that tomorrow I'd find a way to bridge it. Maybe things would feel different in the morning. Maybe. But as I drifted off, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere along the way, I'd stepped onto a path I didn't recognize, and I wasn't sure Ethan would ever meet me at the end of it. Ethan's family made me feel like an outsider at my own baby shower. It was a bright Saturday in early June, the kind of morning when the scent of fresh-cut grass drifted through the open windows and laughter from neighboring yards spilled over the fences. Our backyard was strung with pastel balloons and a big banner that read "Welcome, Baby Miller," but as I looked around at the crowd of relatives and neighbors, I felt oddly invisible, like a guest at a party I hadn't planned. I'd imagined something simple for my baby shower, just a few friends and finger sandwiches, maybe lemonade in mason jars. But Linda had other plans. She'd taken the reins the moment Ethan mentioned the date, organizing everything down to the color of the napkins. I barely recognized my own backyard, filled as it was with folding chairs, game stations, and centerpieces shaped like baby bottles. Richard, Ethan's dad, manned the grill, flipping burgers with the easy confidence of someone who'd hosted these gatherings his whole life. Ethan moved through the crowd with practiced ease, greeting aunts and cousins, laughing at Richard's stories, answering Linda's reminders to make sure your wife is mingling. I tried to keep up, but every time I drifted near a conversation, I felt myself shrinking, unsure when to jump in or whether my voice would even be heard. Linda seemed to sense my uncertainty, and not for the first time, I wondered if she liked me at all, or just tolerated me for Ethan's sake. "Let's do the games," Linda called, waving everyone into a circle. Before I could object, she handed me a blindfold and announced, "Ashley, you're up first, don't mess up your makeup." Her voice was sweet but sharp at the edges. I laughed along, cheeks burning as everyone watched me fumble through guessing baby food flavors. Tiffany caught my eye from across the lawn, offering an exaggerated thumbs up, her grin wide and genuine. The encouragement steadied me. Between games, Richard recounted tales of Miller family traditions, for generations baptized at St. Paul's, holiday fishing trips, the secret to grilling corn just right. He slapped Ethan on the back and declared, "Now it's your turn, son. Gotta keep the line going." There was an unspoken expectation in his tone, one that made my chest tighten. Was I meant to become the next link in their family chain, or just blend in quietly? When the presents were opened, Linda insisted on sitting beside me, reading aloud each card before passing it to me to unwrap. "This one's from Aunt Joyce, she knitted the blanket herself," Linda announced. "Ashley, you'll want to write her a thank you note before the weekend's out." I nodded, careful to appear grateful, even as the pile of gifts felt less like celebration and more like obligation. Ethan, meanwhile, floated at the edges of it all, sipping sweet tea and letting his mom steer the festivities. I longed for him to come over, squeeze my hand, say something, anything, that would anchor me in the moment. But he only smiled when our eyes met, as if to say, "Isn't this nice?" I wondered if he saw what I saw, that everyone here seemed to know their part, except for me. During lunch, I escaped to the patio for a moment of quiet, my plate untouched. Tiffany joined me, sliding onto the bench. "Quite a circus, huh?" she teased, nudging me gently. "Don't let Linda scare you. My mother-in-law once color-coded the cupcakes at my baby shower." I thought about running away. Her warmth coaxed a laugh out of me, easing the knot in my stomach. "Hang in there, Ash. This part won't last forever." A little later, Sandra drifted by, setting a glass of iced tea next to me. "You're holding up well," she said quietly, her eyes kind. "These family things can be overwhelming." There was something in her tone, understanding, maybe even experience, that made me feel less alone, if only for a second. The afternoon wore on, games and laughter swirling around me, but I couldn't shake the sense of standing on the outside, looking in. Finally, Linda gathered everyone for a group photo. "Ashley, stand here." "No, not there, the light's better on this side." She adjusted my hair, then turned to the crowd. "Let's all thank Ashley for letting us take over her backyard today." Her smile was bright, but her eyes held a different message. I smiled for the camera, wishing the ground would swallow me up. As the group began to disperse, Linda's voice rang out again, this time sharper. "Ashley, I hope you realize how much work everyone put into today. Maybe next time you'll show a little more appreciation." The words stung. Laughter faded. All eyes flicked to me, waiting. My face burned as I stammered, "Thank you, everyone. Really, I appreciate all of this." But the words sounded hollow, even to me. With trembling hands, I excused myself and hurried inside, locking the bathroom door behind me. I sank onto the closed toilet lid, pressing my fists against my eyes to stop the tears. In the muffled quiet, party noises distant, it hit me, my voice didn't matter in this family, not really. I could smile and say thank you and play my part, but I'd always be on the outside, peering in. I took a shaky breath, staring at my reflection in the mirror. For the first time, I wondered if Tiffany and Sandra, these women who noticed my struggle without asking, might understand better than anyone. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. But as I splashed water on my face and braced myself to rejoin the party, the question lingered, would I ever truly be accepted here, or was I always destined to feel like a stranger in my own life? Our home became a stage, and I forgot how to play my part. Some evenings, I'd look up from the kitchen sink and catch my reflection in the window, a woman going through the motions, dutifully moving from room to room while the real her hovered somewhere above, wondering when she'd be allowed to come back down. It was the middle of summer in Charlotte, heat pressing against the windows, fireflies blinking outside on slow, golden nights. I moved quietly through the house, careful not to disturb the delicate peace. Ethan spent more nights away now. Sometimes he said it was work, sometimes he just didn't say. He'd text me after dark, running late, "Don't wait up," and I'd watch the clock, dinner growing cold on the table. I tried to imagine him at his parents' house, his mom fussing over him, laughter spilling from the living room. If he was working late, there were no pay stubs to show for it, but I'd learned to stop asking. Each question seemed to chip away at whatever patience he had left for me. When he did come home, he'd let himself in quietly, dropping his keys on the side table and heading straight to the shower. I'd greet him, try to smile, sometimes bring up a new recipe I'd tried, but his answers were short, distracted. Once, I spent all afternoon making his favorite chicken pot pie, just like Linda had told me he loved. He poked at it with his fork, then muttered, "Mom's is less salty." The words stuck in my chest longer than the flavor ever lingered on my tongue. Linda herself called more often, always under the guise of checking in. But her "How are you feeling?" quickly shifted to "Have you started washing the baby clothes yet?" Or "Ethan says you're not eating enough greens, let me send you my list." The calls left me feeling smaller, each suggestion another reminder that no matter what I did, I'd never do it quite right. After one especially stilted phone call, I found myself scrolling through my blog, rereading old posts about my pregnancy cravings and daily walks. The comments, many from women I'd never met, gave me a curious comfort. "My husband never understood either," someone wrote. Another said, "You're not alone, even if it feels that way." I clung to their words on nights when Ethan was gone, letting their distant kindness fill the spaces he'd left empty. Tiffany kept texting, gently insisting I join her for an ice cream run or a slow walk around the block. "Fresh air is good for the baby," she'd tease, adding a line of heart emojis. I always had an excuse: too tired, too much to do, maybe another night. The truth was, I was afraid to leave, afraid Ethan might come home and find the house empty, or worse, that he wouldn't notice at all. He didn't like me going out without him. "You need to rest," he said once, when I mentioned Tiffany's invitation. "It's better for the baby if you're not running around all the time." His voice was gentle, but the message was clear. My world kept shrinking, one gentle no at a time. Most nights ended the same, me alone at the dining table, picking at leftovers, the silence in the house so thick it felt like an extra guest. I'd run the dishwasher, wipe the counters, and try not to look at the clock. Sometimes, I'd slip outside to the porch, just for a few minutes of air. I'd spot Sandra Lee across the street, pruning her rosebushes even after sunset, and we'd exchange a wave. There was something reassuring in her steady presence, a quiet acknowledgement that someone was watching, even if they didn't say a word. One Tuesday afternoon, I reminded Ethan about my prenatal appointment, penciled in for Thursday at 3 p.m. He grunted a distracted "I'll try to make it." I told myself not to expect too much, but a part of me still hoped. Thursday came, bright and humid. I sat in the waiting room, clutching my medical forms and glancing up every time the door swung open. I watched happy couples come and go, wives with rounded bellies, husbands offering water bottles and gentle smiles. The seat beside me stayed empty. I texted Ethan, "Are you still coming?" The reply arrived 10 minutes later, "Stuck at work. Sorry. Too much going on." I told myself I understood. He was busy, he was tired, he was somewhere else. When the nurse called my name, I stood up alone. After the checkup, I walked slowly back to the car, cradling my little bump. As I drove home, I wondered if this loneliness would become my new normal, or if I was just having a hard week. Back in our neighborhood, I noticed Sandra standing by her mailbox, waving as I pulled in. Her eyes lingered on me a moment longer than usual, soft with concern. I managed a small wave back, grateful for her silent company. That night, I set the table for two, as always, but only one plate was used. I lingered over my blog, letting strangers' kind words wash over me. Sometimes, I wrote about the baby, sometimes about the weather, but mostly, I wrote to remember what it felt like to be seen. No one warns you how heavy silence can feel when it's the only thing you hear at dinner. As the sky darkened outside, I stared at the empty seat beside me in the doctor's office, the echo of that void settling into my bones. I realized I wasn't just missing Ethan, I was missing the version of myself who once believed I belonged here, on this suburban stage. From the window, I could see Sandra's porch light flick on, a steady beacon in the dusk. For a fleeting second, I let myself imagine walking over, knocking on her door, and letting the truth tumble out. Maybe, I thought, it's time I learned how to reach for help, even if I wasn't sure how. But for now, I sat in the hush of our home, feeling more alone than ever, and wondering what part one was supposed to play next. Every woman reaches her breaking point, a moment when enough finally means enough. Mine came not with a shout or a slammed door, but in the hush of a summer storm, thunder pressing down on the neighborhood while I sat alone in the dim glow of the kitchen. The rain spattered on the windows, wind teasing the porch chimes into uneasy song. The world outside felt restless and charged, as if it knew what was coming before I did. Ethan had texted hours earlier that he'd be late, long day. Don't wait up, and by the time I heard the garage door rumble open, the sky was charcoal, streaked with silver. I took a breath, smoothing my hands over the stretch of my belly, trying to hold on to calm. When he came in, his hair damp and shoulders tense, I hoped for a gentle greeting, or at least a word of kindness. Instead, he tossed his keys on the counter, eyes flicking over the room. "Where are my barbecue chips?" he demanded, as if I'd hidden them on purpose. The accusation took me off guard. "I'm sorry," I said, "I must have forgotten to get them when I went out." I wanted to add that the rain had come suddenly, that I'd barely made it to the car with groceries as it was, but I knew excuses would only make things worse. He grumbled about how it wasn't that hard to remember one thing, his voice growing sharper with each word. I felt the old, familiar urge to apologize, to fix whatever I'd broken. But tonight, I just stood there, the storm outside echoing the one inside me. "It's just a snack, Ethan. I'm doing my best." He shot me a look, half disbelief, half annoyance, and went to shower without another word. The silence that followed was thicker than any argument, pressing down around me. I stared at the half-empty snack cabinet, wishing I could will it full, wishing I could make this house feel like home again. Sometimes, the loudest arguments happen in complete silence. I wandered to the front window, watching the rain sheet down the glass, lights across the street shimmering in the puddles. A knock startled me, a gentle tapping, insistent but not demanding. I opened the door to find Sandra, hair tucked under a raincoat, holding out an extra umbrella. "Thought you could use this," she said, her voice warm above the wind. "Storm's supposed to last all night." I hesitated, but Sandra lingered, her eyes full of quiet understanding. "You don't have to weather every storm alone," she said softly, pressing the umbrella into my hands. "If you ever want company, or just a break, my door's always open." I managed a smile, a real one for the first time in days. "Thank you, Sandra." "Really?" When she left, I stood for a moment in the entryway, umbrella in hand, feeling the weight of her kindness. Sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most. Maybe it's true, I thought, that neighbors are a kind of family you choose, even if you don't know it at first. A little later, the phone rang. Tiffany's cheerful voice tumbled through the line. "Ash, I'm picking up ice cream. Want to sneak out for a girls' night?" I glanced at the clock, then at the storm pounding outside. "Thanks, Tiff, but I think I'll stay in tonight," I said, my words tinged with regret. She didn't push. "Rain checks are my specialty. I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" Her easy affection made the ache in my chest ease a little. "Okay. Thanks, Tiff." After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, journal open, pen hovering above the page. For weeks I'd been scribbling shopping lists and doctor's notes, but tonight, words of a different kind came spilling out, truths I'd been too scared to say out loud. I wrote about Ethan's distance, about the way I sometimes felt invisible in my own life, about the fear that maybe I wasn't enough. But as the rain softened and the house grew quiet, I also wrote that I was tired of making myself small. I wrote, for the first time, that I deserved more. The tears came, slow but steady, not of sadness, but of release. I pressed my hand over my heart and whispered it aloud, I deserve more, letting the words settle in the room like a vow. Sometime later, Ethan came downstairs, scrolling on his phone. He didn't notice my red eyes or the journal still open in front of me. Instead, he cleared his throat, as if shifting into a new scene. My parents are planning a family trip. Dad's already booked a cabin for next weekend. They want us there, so, be ready. He said it like an afterthought, as if my presence was as simple as packing an overnight bag. I stared at him, the finality of his words washing over me, mixing with the last notes of thunder outside. As he disappeared upstairs, I fingered the umbrella Sandra had given me, its handle smooth and reassuring. The idea of asking for help, of letting someone in, lingered at the edges of my mind, no longer something to fear, but a possibility. I looked out the window, storm clouds breaking apart, and wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was strength to be found on the other side of enough. A trip meant to bring us closer was the final proof I no longer belonged. Early fall sunlight slipped across the hardwood as I walked from room to room, packing what I thought I might need, extra socks, prenatal vitamins, the thick robe Maria sent me last month. Ethan moved briskly through the house, tossing things into a duffel bag with no sense of care or order. I watched as he stuffed my going-home dress underneath his sneakers, not bothering to fold it. "Do you have your toothbrush?" he asked, already zipping the bag halfway. "And don't forget the chargers." I reached for my prenatal medicine on the counter, but he was already in the next room, talking loudly on the phone with Linda. "Yeah, she's almost ready." "No, I don't know if she packed enough layers, Mom, she's fine." Linda's voice, thin but insistent, carried through the speaker. "She needs to keep moving, Ethan. That's what keeps the baby healthy. None of this lying around nonsense." Richard chimed in with a booming laugh. "Women these days have it easy. My mother worked until the day before she delivered." I tried to tune them out, focusing on the slow rhythm of my breathing, the weight of my belly. I was 9 months along and every motion felt magnified, a low ache in my back, a tightening across my stomach, an exhaustion I could not name. I texted Sandra a quick hello, just to anchor myself. She replied almost instantly, "Remember, call if you need anything. Don't be afraid to ask for help." That simple message warmed me more than the sun outside. Tiffany sent a care package that morning, granola bars, peppermints, a lavender sachet. Tucked inside was a sticky note, "You're stronger than you think. Love, Tiff." I held the note for a long time, wishing I believed it. By the time we loaded the car, I was already worn thin. Ethan and his parents buzzed around me, their excitement about the cabin palpable, their concern for my comfort practically non-existent. "You'll be fine, Ashley," Linda said, patting my arm. "Just stay hydrated and don't be dramatic." As we pulled out of the driveway, I glanced back at our little house, hoping I'd find myself again when I returned. The air was tense with anticipation, but not the good kind. Richard fiddled with the radio. Linda unwrapped mints. Ethan adjusted the AC vent, humming along with a country song. I sat quietly, hands folded over my belly, trying not to make waves. The drive wound through back roads, then onto the highway, mountains rising up in the distance. I watched the trees blur past, feeling each pothole in my bones. Linda kept up a steady stream of advice, what I should eat, how I should sleep, which baby names sounded strong. Ethan drove one-handed, scrolling through his phone at stoplights, mostly ignoring my attempts at conversation. When I winced at a sudden pain in my side, Linda tooted. "Don't make that face, dear. That's just part of it. My deliveries were all harder than yours will be." I tried to smile, biting my tongue. Richard's voice boomed from the passenger seat. "You're a miller now, tough as nails. Don't let a little discomfort scare you." His words were meant as encouragement, but they stung all the same. About an hour in, I shifted in my seat, the ache in my back growing sharper. I pressed my hand to my belly, feeling a strange pressure. "Ethan," I said softly, "I think I'm having some contractions." He barely looked up from the road. "You're just anxious, Ash. The doctor said first babies are almost always late. We're almost at the cabin. Try to relax." Linda leaned over her shoulder. "Drink some water, dear. You'll be fine." I stared out the window, fighting the urge to scream, to insist that this felt different, that something was happening. But I didn't want to spoil their trip, didn't want to be accused of being dramatic. I kept quiet, gripping the door handle as another wave of pain washed over me. Sandra's text blinked on my screen again, "You're not alone, even if you feel it. I'm here." I clung to those words as the road narrowed, trees pressing close on either side. Minutes later, as we reached a remote rest stop, I felt a sudden, unmistakable gush of warmth. My water had broken. Panic seized me. "Ethan," I gasped, "I think my water just broke. We need to stop, please, I need to go to the hospital." The car jerked to a halt. Ethan threw the car into park, looking bewildered. "Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure?" he demanded, as if I could mistake something so momentous. Linda twisted around, frowning. "It's probably just a little leak. You're fine. Let's get to the cabin first, then we'll see." Richard was already unloading snacks from the trunk, oblivious. My heart pounded as I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking. Tiffany's note tumbled from my bag and landed at my feet. I remembered her words, "You're stronger than you think," but in that moment, all I felt was terror and a bone-deep loneliness. I tried to dial Sandra, fingers slippery with sweat, but the signal flickered between bars. The world outside the car was gray and endless. I looked at Ethan, searching his face for concern, for partnership, for anything that would tell me I mattered. But he just sighed and muttered, "We'll figure it out, Ash. Don't make a scene." As the pain grew sharper, I realized this wasn't just about the baby coming early. This was the final, clearest proof that my place in this family was as fragile as the silence between us. All I wanted, more than anything, was to be seen, to be cared for, not just managed. My vision swam. I pressed my forehead to the glass, feeling cold and utterly alone. I gathered my courage, searching my bag one more time for my phone. My heart thundered in my chest as I tried, desperately, to reach out for help, knowing that if I didn't, no one else would do it for me. And as the first droplets of rain spattered on the windshield, I understood that sometimes, the only way forward is to admit you can't do it alone. They say you never forget the moment your life changes forever. I remember every terrifying second, each detail burned into my memory with a clarity that both haunts and, strangely, steadies me. One moment, I was another passenger in the Miller family car, clutching my belly as the contractions pressed in with slow, unstoppable force. The next, I was left alone in a misty parking lot, breath fogging in the cold, the echo of their voices fading behind the slamming of car doors. The rest stop was little more than a circle of cracked asphalt, hemmed by pines and the distant hush of the highway. I shivered, heart racing, the world narrowing to the sharp ache in my back and the growing certainty that my baby was coming, whether anyone was ready or not. "Ethan, I need to go to the hospital. Right now. Please," I managed, voice trembling. I reached for his sleeve, desperate for something human in this whirlwind of pain. He frowned, stepping back. "Ashley, just breathe. We're almost to the cabin." Mom says you're fine. I'll drive you later, if you're still hurting. Linda's face appeared over his shoulder, annoyance written plain as day. You're making a scene, honey. You can't just stop everything for a little cramp. Richard grumbled something about toughing it out, already shifting bags in the trunk. I could barely speak. I'm in labor. I know my body, I need help. My voice cracked, but it made no difference. Ethan's jaw clenched. If you're going to be like this, maybe you should just wait here. We have to keep moving, Dad booked the cabin months ago. You'll be fine. Call someone if you need to. The finality in his voice chilled me more than the morning air. I watched, stunned, as he herded his parents into the car, shutting the doors with an efficiency that left no room for argument. The engine rumbled, tires crunched over gravel, and in the blink of an eye, they were gone, nothing but red taillights shrinking into the fog. I stood there, numb, the pain washing over me in relentless waves. Sandra's words echoed through my mind, you don't have to weather every storm alone. But I felt utterly adrift, my phone shaking in my hands as I fumbled to unlock it. My breath came in shallow bursts. I scrolled desperately, finding Sandra's number first. She picked up after a single ring. Ashley? What's wrong? I sobbed, fighting panic. They left me. I'm in labor, at the rest stop, somewhere near the state line. I don't know what to do, Sandra, I'm scared. She didn't hesitate. Stay on the line, sweetheart. I'm calling 911 right now. Help is on the way. You're not alone, okay? Just hold on. Can you sit down somewhere safe? I slumped onto the curb, pressing my back against the car's cold fender. The pain was fierce now, pulling every thought into its orbit. My phone buzzed, Tiffany's name lighting up the screen. I answered with shaking fingers. Tiff, I'm in labor. They left me. Her voice, always so cheerful, went instantly soft. Honey, listen to me. Breathe. You can do this. Sandra's getting help. Just focus on your breath. In and out. That's it. I'm right here with you, Ash. You're strong. You're not alone. Her calm steadied me through the next wave of pain. My world shrank to Tiffany's voice counting my breaths, Sandra's reassurance in the background, the far-off wail of a siren growing closer. Someone, a kind stranger, a woman with gentle eyes, appeared at my side, offering her jacket as a blanket. Help is coming, she said, squeezing my hand. Just keep breathing. Minutes blurred into a whirlwind. EMTs arrived, efficient, warm, moving me gently onto a stretcher. I watched the trees overhead whip by as they loaded me into the ambulance, Sandra's voice still on speaker. I'm meeting you at the hospital. I'll call your mom. Everything will be okay, Ashley. The drive was a patchwork of pain, fear, and the surreal realization that I was truly, finally doing this alone. In the fluorescent hush of the hospital, nurses swarmed with calm, practiced care. Sandra appeared at my bedside, breathless and worried, her hand finding mine. You made it, Ash. I'm right here. Labor is a kind of wild surrender, a letting go of everything but the moment. I clung to Sandra's hand, to the kind eyes of the doctor, to the fierce voice inside me that whispered, keep going. You're not alone. Hours blurred together, pain crusting and breaking. At last, with one final cry, my daughter arrived, a tiny, perfect miracle, her first wail sharp and bright as sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Relief and exhaustion swept over me in equal measure. I held her, breathless, stunned, and wept tears that washed away weeks, months, of fear. The nurses smiled, Sandra wiped her own tears, and in that moment, I knew I was stronger than I ever believed. The hospital staff made sure I was safe, never leaving me alone. Sandra texted my mom and Tiffany, who sent flowers and called every hour. As the adrenaline faded, a gentle peace settled in, a feeling I hadn't known in so long: safety. My phone buzzed endlessly, Ethan's name flashing again and again, messages piling up. I didn't answer. Not now. Not when the only thing that mattered was the baby in my arms, her warmth anchoring me to this new beginning. As I traced her tiny fingers, Sandra leaned over, whispering, "You're not alone anymore, Ashley. You never have to be again." I smiled through tears, holding my daughter close, and promised her, and myself, that our story would be different. The silence after giving birth was louder than any argument. The world outside my hospital window moved on, cars swishing down the wet autumn streets, golden leaves flickering in the sunlight, but inside, time seemed to slow, thick with a hush that pressed against my heart. My daughter, Emily, slept bundled in a halo of soft blankets, her tiny chest rising and falling with the effortless peace of someone brand new. I sat in bed, propped by stiff pillows, physically and emotionally exhausted in a way I'd never known. My body felt both heavy and hollow, every muscle aching, but my mind raced with 1,000 thoughts I couldn't chase away. I clung to Emily, drawing comfort from her small warmth, whispering promises into her downy hair. "We're safe, sweetheart. I've got you now. I promise." Through those early hours, I kept waiting for Ethan to burst through the hospital door, demanding, apologizing, insisting he belonged in this moment. He never did. I watched the door as nurses came and went, changing linens, checking monitors, always moving with the calm of people who had seen all kinds of heartache. Not once did Ethan's face appear, and with each passing hour, the absence weighed heavier than his worst words ever had. Sandra became my lifeline. She visited every afternoon, arms loaded with essentials, soft socks, a fleece blanket, homemade chicken soup that filled the room with the scent of rosemary and home. She brushed my hair, made sure I drank water, reminded me to rest, not just for Emily, but for myself. "You don't have to be a hero, Ashley," she whispered as she tucked the blanket around my feet. "Let people take care of you, too." Tiffany called every day, her smile lighting up the phone screen even from miles away. She set up a meal train with other neighbors, promising that every night I'd have something hot and nourishing waiting. "You're not alone, Ash. We're all rooting for you." She made me laugh, sharing stories about her toddler's latest misadventures, the way he'd tried to put socks on the cat and turned the living room into a jungle gym. I realized, with a pang, how much I needed these small joys, these reminders that life continued outside the walls of crisis. The hospital staff quickly learned the shape of my pain and did what they could to shield me. They fielded phone calls I didn't want to answer, Ethan's name lighting up the board, Linda's sharp voice insisting on her rights as a grandmother. A kindly nurse with silver hair patted my shoulder. "If anyone calls and you don't want to see them, just say the word, honey. This is your space." When my parents, Maria and Robert, arrived, they brought worry and relief in equal measure. Maria folded me into her arms, her usual reserve breaking as she pressed her cheek to mine. "Oh, Ash. Oh, honey." Robert, who'd always been the practical one, just looked at me and Emily and shook his head. "If you were my son-in-law, I'd have words with him." Their shock at what Ethan had done was plain, their love, even in its awkwardness, was a balm. For the first time in months, I let myself cry without shame. Sandra held me as the tears came, silent, unstoppable. "I can't go back," I sobbed, the words tumbling out. "I can't forgive him. I don't even want to try." She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. You don't have to. You just have to take care of you and Emily now. Let the rest fall away. That night, I decided to block Ethan's number, at least for a while. With trembling fingers, I turned off notifications, setting my phone face down on the tray beside the bed. There would be time, later, for decisions and confrontations, but right now, I needed quiet. I needed to breathe, to hold my daughter and believe that the world was still turning in my favor. Just as I began to relax, a nurse peeked in, a little breathless. Ashley? Someone from your husband's family is in the waiting room, demanding to see you. My heart lurched. I pulled Emily closer, her warmth anchoring me. I looked at Sandra, whose expression turned steely in an instant. Do you want to see them? The nurse asked quietly. I shook my head, firm for the first time in a long time. No, I don't. Not now. Maybe not ever. The nurse nodded, closing the door behind her. Sandra perched on the bed, wrapping an arm around my shoulders, and for the first time since Emily was born, I let myself believe that I was safe. That I could make choices, hard ones, yes, but my own. Outside, autumn leaves whirled past the window, the city moving on. Inside, my world was small and fragile and sacred, a quiet place carved out of all that pain. I pressed a kiss to Emily's forehead, promising her a life where she'd never have to wonder if she was loved. And as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, I felt hope flicker in the silence, brighter, somehow, than any apology could ever be. I never expected my private pain to become public outrage. My life had been shrinking for months, first to a house, then a hospital room, then the small world of my daughter's nursery. But now, in ways I couldn't have predicted or controlled, my story was breaking free, rippling out into the world, the details no longer mine alone. Tiffany sat beside me in the hospital that morning, her laptop balanced on her knees, her fingers flying across the keys. You sure you're okay with this? She asked quietly, her expression gentle, no hint of the stubbornness that sometimes showed up at yoga. We'll keep your face blurred, and no one will use your name if you don't want. But people need to know, Ash. And you're not the only one who's ever been left behind. I hesitated, heart fluttering. It was one thing to write about pain in my blog, behind the shield of a screen, but another to let the world in. But I thought of Tiffany's words, people are kinder than you think, if they only know the truth. I nodded, voice small but sure. Do it. Maybe it'll help someone else. Within hours, Tiffany's post was up in the Charlotte Moms group, a simple story, a pregnant woman abandoned at a rest stop by her husband and in-laws, rescued by friends and strangers. The details were blurry, my face pixelated, but the hurt was clear enough. No woman should have to go through this, Tiffany wrote. If you see a neighbor in need, reach out. I watched as the comments multiplied, the story picked up by local Facebook groups, then Instagram, then Twitter. People I didn't know messaged offers of help, meals, babysitting, legal advice. Sandra came by with her husband Charles that afternoon. He worked in public relations, and with a few quick calls, he ensured the local press kept their distance and didn't publish our address. You deserve privacy, Ashley, he said, shaking my hand, his kindness matter-of-fact and unassuming. At first, the attention felt overwhelming, even embarrassing. I was used to hiding my feelings, my disappointments, my bruised pride. Now, neighbors I barely knew sent cards and blankets, nurses squeezed my hand with tears in their eyes, even the woman who ran the coffee shop near my old office brought over a gift card and a handwritten note. My shame began to shrink as the flood of compassion washed in. Every "you're not alone" chipped away at the old fear. But not everyone was kind. Ethan, who had vanished after leaving me at the rest stop, suddenly began to reach out in every way possible. My phone lit up with blocked calls, angry voicemails, messages through mutual friends. He wrote me a long email. "You've made a fool of me. You're ruining my life. Why can't you just let things go?" I read it once, then deleted it. There was nothing left for him to say. Sandra's family received calls too. Ethan's company, nervous about the blowback, contacted Charles, hoping to manage the narrative. Charles, to his credit, was firm. "We won't be helping anyone cover this up. If you cared about privacy, you should have cared for Ashley." Sandra hugged me tightly that evening, her arms strong and warm. "You're part of our family now," she whispered. "Let them squirm. You focus on getting better." The media attention only grew. Reporters lingered near the hospital, but Charles and the staff formed a protective ring. The head nurse posted a sign at the nurses' station: "No visitors without patient approval. This is a safe space." I'd never felt so visible, yet so protected at the same time. Amid all this, my parents finally arrived at the hospital. Maria, usually quiet, confronted Linda and Richard in the waiting room. "You don't get to treat my daughter like a problem and walk away," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "Ashley may have married your son, but she is still my daughter, and I won't let you hurt her anymore." Richard mumbled apologies. Linda tried to insist they'd been misunderstood. My father simply stood behind my mother, his silence more damning than any words. That night, as Emily slept in her bassinet, I sat by the window and watched the world go on outside. My phone pinged with another message, a scanned letter from Ethan's parents, delivered by their lawyer. I opened it with shaking hands. It was a threat. They were deeply concerned for Emily's well-being and considering all legal options to secure custody. The words made my chest ache, but something in me had changed. I was afraid, yes, but I was no longer alone. Sandra, Tiffany, Charles, my parents, people stood beside me now, their kindness shining brighter than any threat. Tiffany called that night, voice crackling with excitement. "Ash, did you see the outpouring online? People are rallying for you. You have an army on your side, whether you want them or not." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. Maybe I do. Maybe I can handle whatever comes next. Emily stirred, her little fist waving in the moonlight. I picked her up and held her close, breathing in her baby scent. "You and me, kid," I whispered. "We're going to be okay." It's a strange thing, finding confidence in the wake of crisis. I felt myself growing stronger, steadier, as support poured in from all directions. Maybe Tiffany was right, people really are kinder than you think, once they know the truth. There's a special kind of strength in saying no for the first time. I didn't realize how much of my life had been shaped by yes to Ethan, yes to his family, yes to being quiet and agreeable, even when my heart screamed for something else. But autumn had arrived in Charlotte, and as the leaves blazed red and gold, I felt a shift within myself, something new, solid, unbreakable. Sandra once told me, "Protecting yourself is protecting your child." The words played in my mind as I sat across from Michael Harris, the attorney recommended by my father's friend. His office smelled of coffee and old books, the walls lined with legal diplomas and photos of a smiling family. Michael was kind, direct, and didn't waste my time. He listened carefully as I laid out the story, every painful detail, every moment Ethan's absence had widened into abandonment. "You have more rights than you think," Michael assured me. "Custody, child support, even protection from harassment. We'll make sure you and Emily are safe, Ashley." For the first time, someone used the word safe like a promise, not a possibility. I breathed easier as he outlined our plan: restraining order, formal custody filing, child support petition, documentation for every threat and call. Back at my parents' house, Maria helped me sort through boxes of baby clothes and old books. She packed with the efficiency of someone who'd started over before, making lists and folding clothes while Robert rocked Emily in the living room. Our home felt crowded and a little chaotic, but for once, the noise meant comfort. Tiffany dropped by with groceries and a soft new blanket for Emily. Sandra showed up with takeout and 2 strong arms for carrying boxes. They filled the house with laughter, stories, and, when I needed it, space to grieve. Meanwhile, Ethan left a trail of voicemails. The first were soft, apologetic, pleading for just a chance to talk. Then came the angry ones. "You're ruining everything. You can't keep me from my daughter. My parents are furious." Linda called, too, her voice sweet and dangerous as honey. "Ashley, dear, you've made your point. Come home now, and we can move past all this." But the spell had broken. Each call was just another reminder of the cage I'd stepped out of. One afternoon, as golden light filled the hallway, Ethan showed up at my parents' house, uninvited. His face was drawn, eyes wild, words tumbling out, accusations, then apologies, then threats. My father stood between us, steady as a mountain. "Leave, Ethan. Now." But it was my voice that cut through the tension. "You need to go. This marriage is over. I'm protecting Emily, and myself. I won't let you hurt us again." There was no anger in my tone, just a finality that surprised us both. Shaken, Ethan left. I called Michael, voice trembling only a little, and by nightfall, the restraining order was in motion. Sandra and Tiffany kept vigil, their presence reassuring and constant. Later, I sat by Emily's crib, watching her breathe and sleep. I opened my journal and wrote, in bold, careful letters, "I am not the same woman I was." I traced the words with my finger, feeling their truth sink deep. The next day, Michael called with news. "The court date is set. Ethan's contesting custody. We'll need to prepare, but you're not alone in this." My heart raced, fear and resolve battling in my chest. I squeezed Emily's hand, promising her once more, "We'll get through this together." As evening settled over Charlotte, I stood by the window, letting the autumn air cool my cheeks. For the first time in a long while, I believed in my own strength, not just for Emily, but for myself. There was power in drawing boundaries, in choosing what, and who, to let in. Tomorrow, the fight would continue. But tonight, the house was full of safety and hope. And I was ready. Some moments change you so completely, you can't go back. The day I walked into court was the coldest morning of the year so far, the sky outside frosted silver, breath puffing white as I stepped from my parents' car. My hands trembled, not from the chill but from the gravity of what lay ahead, a battle I'd never wanted, but would fight with every part of me. I remembered the girl who used to avoid conflict at all costs, the one who swallowed her feelings and smiled through disappointment, afraid to rock the boat. That version of me wouldn't have made it to this courthouse. She wouldn't have stood tall under the glare of courtroom lights, her testimony organized in neat folders, her resolve stronger than fear. Michael met me at the courthouse steps, his briefcase clutched in one hand, his other hand steady on my shoulder. "We're prepared," he said, his voice calm. "All you have to do is tell the truth." I nodded, pressing my palm to the place on my chest where Emily's first photo rested, a talisman tucked in my blouse, close to my heart. Inside, the courthouse felt foreign, echoes of footsteps, shuffling papers, a low murmur of voices. Maria gripped my hand, her wedding ring cool against my skin. "You come from strong women, Ash. My mother always said, do what you must for your children, and let the rest fall away." She smiled at me, lines of worry softening around her eyes. "No matter what happens, you're not alone. Sandra and Tiffany had insisted on coming, juggling Emily between them in the waiting area. Tiffany hugged me tight before I entered, whispering, "You're already the bravest person I know." Sandra squeezed my arm, her strength steadying me in a way words never could. Michael and I reviewed everything one last time in a quiet corner: voicemails, text logs, hospital records, photos, a timeline so detailed it was almost clinical. But the heart of the story was never in the paperwork. It was in the nights I'd spent awake, terrified and hopeful, in the choices I'd made to protect myself and my child. The hearing began. Ethan sat across from me at the long table, hair neat, suit crisp, his eyes darting everywhere but mine. Linda and Richard sat behind him, faces pinched, whispering furiously as the attorneys introduced themselves. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Michael laid out our case calmly, presenting evidence with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. Ethan's attorney tried to paint me as overreactive, emotional, unwilling to forgive. Ethan's voice wavered as he took the stand, twisting the facts, blaming me for his absence, for embarrassing the family. But when asked direct questions, his answers slipped into evasions, shrugs, half-truths, awkward silences. The judge watched him closely, making notes. Then it was my turn. My heart hammered as I walked to the witness stand, but I found a strange, steady courage. Michael asked me about my experience, the abandonment, the loneliness, the moments of crisis. I told the truth. My voice shook only once, and then settled into clarity. I described the rest stop, the pain, the help from Sandra and the hospital, the tidal wave of fear, and then, the strength that followed. At the end, Michael asked simply, "Ashley, what do you want for yourself and your daughter?" I looked at the judge, at Ethan, at the rows of empty seats and the faces of people who loved me. "I choose my daughter, and myself," I said. "I want safety. I want peace. I want Emily to grow up knowing she is loved, and that I stood up for both of us. I'm not afraid anymore." A hush settled in the courtroom as I finished. The judge nodded, closing her notebook. "We'll take a short recess before I announce my ruling." I stepped down, knees suddenly weak, and returned to my seat. Maria wrapped me in her arms. Sandra and Tiffany waved encouragement from the gallery, beaming. For the first time in this whole journey, fear loosened its hold. No matter the ruling, I knew I'd spoken my truth, and that was a victory all its own. Outside, the wind rattled the courthouse doors. But inside, in that moment between testimony and judgment, I felt lighter than I had in years. There are some battles you fight because you have to, others, because you're finally ready. As I waited for the judge's return, I realized I was no longer the girl who feared conflict. I was a woman who'd taken her stand, and there was no going back. Freedom doesn't always look the way you imagined, but you recognize it when it finally comes. I'd spent months dreaming of escape, sometimes in grand gestures, sometimes just in the hope of a quiet morning free from fear. But when the judge read her decision in that high-ceilinged courtroom, I felt a simple, steady relief, a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. The gavel sounded. "Primary custody to Ashley Miller," the judge announced, her voice clear and firm. "Mr. Miller is ordered to provide child support and will have no contact except through legal counsel. Visitation is suspended until further notice." I gripped Michael's hand under the table, breath catching as the words sank in. Maria squeezed my shoulder, tears shining in her eyes. I used to wonder if I could ever break free of their control, Ethan's manipulation, Linda's icy interference, the constant, subtle reminders that I'd never quite belonged. Now, for the first time, the power was mine. I stood, gathering my things, and looked back only once. Ethan stared at the table, jaw set and eyes stormy, while Linda and Richard huddled together, whispering furiously. The bailiff led them out before they could approach me. There would be no final word, no parting shot. Michael patted my arm. You did it, Ashley. And you did it with dignity. I hugged him tightly, gratitude overflowing. Thank you. For everything. We left the courthouse into sharp winter sunlight, the world sparkling as if it had been washed clean overnight. Emily's little hand wrapped around my finger as I buckled her into her car seat, her wide eyes curious, unfazed by the chaos left behind. The next week was a blur of boxes and goodbyes. Tiffany and Sandra swooped in with their usual gusto, packing tape and pizza in hand, laughter echoing through the empty rooms of my parents' house. Sandra had found a small but sunny apartment not far from her own, a place with a tree-lined view and a window seat just right for reading. Tiffany hung fairy lights in the nursery, making Emily giggle as colored shadows danced on the walls. On moving day, Maria stood beside me in the new living room, hands on her hips, surveying the boxes. It's not much, I said, suddenly self-conscious. She shook her head. It's a beginning, and it's yours. That's what matters. We set up Emily's crib together, hanging a mobile that Sandra had made, tiny felt birds that spun gently when the window was open. The nursery became the heart of our new life. I framed a photo of Emily surrounded by all the people who had carried us through, Maria, Robert, Sandra, Charles, Tiffany, even the hospital nurse who had once tucked an extra blanket around me with a wink. I hung it over the crib, a daily reminder of our true support system. Linda and Richard tried to visit once, arriving at my door unannounced, but I met them in the hallway, arms crossed and voice calm. This isn't your home. Please leave. For a moment, Linda's mask slipped and I saw something like regret, or maybe just surprise that their rules no longer applied here. They left without another word, and I felt nothing but relief. December passed in a blur of cold mornings and small joys. Tiffany brought her son for playdates, Sandra taught me how to make her mother's apple pie. My parents visited often, their awkwardness fading with every smile Emily gave them. We celebrated Emily's first Christmas with mismatched stockings, borrowed ornaments, and a house full of laughter. I watched her reach for the twinkling lights, cheeks flushed with happiness, and felt an overwhelming sense of peace. On Christmas Eve, we gathered around the table, friends, family, chosen kin, and raised glasses of cider to new beginnings. I looked at Emily, at Sandra and Tiffany, at my mother laughing with Charles over burnt cookies, and knew in my bones, this was what family was supposed to be. Late that night, after everyone had gone, I sat in the quiet nursery, rocking Emily to sleep. My heart was light, hope blooming where doubt had once lived. For the first time in a long time, I believed I was enough. Then, just as I was drifting off, a sharp knock at the door startled me. On the welcome mat sat a thick envelope, legal paper, Ethan's name scrawled across the front. I opened it, hand steady, and scanned the contents. He was appealing the court's decision. My chest tightened, but fear didn't follow. I read the letter, then tucked it away. Whatever came next, I was ready. I was not alone, not anymore. And this time I would fight from a place of strength, not desperation. I pressed a kiss to Emily's forehead, her breathing slow and even, and whispered, "We're going to be just fine." The cycle was broken. A new story had begun. This wasn't the life I expected, but it's the one I chose. As the old year folded itself into memory, I stood in my small, sunlit kitchen, arranging mismatched plates on the table and listening to the happy chaos from the next room. Emily squealed with delight at Tiffany's son's attempts to dance to a holiday song, while Sandra and my mom swapped stories with neighbors who'd become like family. The walls glowed with fairy lights, reflections dancing in the window glass. It was simple, imperfect, and everything I needed. Sandra's words, the very first kindness she'd ever offered me, "Sometimes, your chosen family is the best family," looped through my mind as I carried Emily into the living room. The party was nothing fancy, just sparkling cider, leftover pie, a bowl of popcorn, and the comfort of voices that asked nothing more of me than to show up as myself. I caught Tiffany's eye across the couch and smiled. Without her, without Sandra, without Maria's quiet strength or the laughter of these neighbors who'd rallied to our side, I might still be alone, adrift, apologizing for wanting more. Instead, here I was, holding Emily close as the countdown to midnight ticked closer, filled with a hope I'd almost forgotten was possible. After dinner, as the others gathered around the coffee table for games, I slipped into my bedroom for a quiet moment. Emily watched me curiously as I opened my journal to a blank page and began to write. It wasn't for court this time, nor for my blog or a lawyer. It was a letter to Ethan, one I'd never send, but needed to write for myself. Ethan. Thank you for the lessons, and for Emily. I wish you well, but I'm closing this door for good. This is my life now, a life filled with love, with chosen family, with hope. Please respect our boundaries. We both deserve peace. Ashley. I felt lighter as I closed the journal, a gentle finality in my chest. Forgiveness didn't mean letting Ethan back in, it meant letting myself move forward. Back in the living room, Maria and Robert sat side by side, quietly watching the festivities. When I handed Emily to my mom, she pulled me close and whispered, "I'm so proud of you, Ash. Not just for surviving, but for choosing to thrive." Dad nodded, his hand warm on my shoulder. You built something real here. That's worth everything. Midnight came in a rush of noise and laughter. We gathered by the window, counting down as fireworks flared above the trees, bursts of gold and blue lighting the night. I lifted Emily, her small hands reaching toward the colors. We'll write our own story from here, I promised, pressing a kiss to her soft hair. In her eyes, I saw my future, not defined by what we'd lost, but by everything we'd found. After everyone had left and the apartment grew quiet, I checked my blog one last time. Over the months, it had become a lifeline, not just for me, but for others who read and wrote back, who shared their loneliness and their hope. Tonight, I didn't have an ending, only an invitation. If you're out there, you're not alone. There is always a way forward, even if you can't see it yet. I found my way through kindness, through friendship, through asking for help, and so can you. My story is still being written, and yours is, too. Reach out if you need a friend. We're in this together. I hit publish, then closed the laptop, feeling at peace. As I tucked Emily into bed, my phone buzzed, a message from a mom in the next neighborhood. Hi, Ashley. I saw your story. I'm not sure who else to ask, but, could you talk sometime? I could really use a friend. I smiled, cradling Emily, ready to pay forward the kindness that had saved us. We were, after all, a family made stronger by community, a circle that would keep growing, one brave hello at a time. The world outside glittered with the promise of a new year. My story, I realized, wasn't ending at all. It was just beginning, full circle, and wide open. Looking back, I realize the hardest chapters in life can lead us to the greatest gifts, friendship, courage, and the family we choose for ourselves. My journey taught me that kindness, both given and received, can light the darkest paths and help us find our way home. In a world that can feel lonely, reaching out, whether to help or to ask for help, reminds us that we're never truly alone. If my story touched your heart or echoed your own, I'd love to hear your thoughts, memories, or hopes for the new year ahead. Sometimes, sharing our stories is the first step to healing, for ourselves and for each other.